Good afternoon. The Secretary General and the President will start with opening remarks, and then they'll have time for just a couple of questions. Secretary General.
President Đukanović, dear Milo, welcome to NATO headquarters. It's really a great honor and pleasure to meet you again. And you are the first head of state from a NATO allied country, who I receive here at the NATO headquarters in the new building. Congratulations on your election as president. And as we all know, tomorrow we will mark 1 year since Montenegro joined NATO, a sovereign country in a strong alliance, with a seat at our table and an equal voice in shaping our decisions. This is an important day for Montenegro and an important day for the whole alliance. Montenegro's accession has helped promote stability in Western Balkans because security promotes prosperity, and it has contributed to Euro-Atlantic security. Thank you for your commitment to increase the number of troops in our training mission in Afghanistan. I also welcome that you are increasing defense spending with a clear plan to invest 2% of GDP in defense by 2024. So Montenegro is proving to be a very solid and very reliable member of the alliance. And just as Montenegro is stepping up for NATO, NATO is stepping up for Montenegro. NATO is a defensive alliance. We protect all allies against any threat. So tomorrow, NATO will begin air policing patrols over Montenegro with jets from Italy and from Greece. This peacetime mission will ensure the safety of your skies, whether from civilian or military aircraft in distress or any other threat. NATO provides this support to allies without their own air forces, a strong sign of NATO solidarity. We just had an excellent meeting where we discussed our preparations for the NATO summit in July here in Brussels. NATO will continue to adapt to a challenging world, to enhance the security of all our citizens, and we will continue to boost the readiness of our forces to ensure we have the right forces in the right place at the right time. We will also continue to project stability in our neighborhood and step up the fight against terrorism. One of our best tools in the fight against terrorism is to train local forces. And that is exactly what NATO is doing from the Western Balkans to Afghanistan and as a member of the global coalition to defeat ISIS. At the summit in July, we will launch a new training mission in Iraq to ensure that the Iraqi forces can defend their own country and prevent ISIS from ever coming back. We also discussed Russia. We agreed that our dual-track policy of deterrence and dialogue is the right one. I chaired a meeting of the Nato-Russia Council last week, and our dialogue with Russia is even more important when tensions are high. So once again, President Đukanović, it's a great honor and pleasure to receive you here at the NATO headquarters, and I look forward to receiving you once again at our summit in July. Welcome.
Thank you. Poštovani gospodine generalni sekretare,
Secretary General, dear Jens, I would like to thank you first of all for a very informative meeting today and for the words of welcome and also for this privilege to be the first head of a state to be received in this country. As you know, this is my first visit abroad after I became again the president of my country. I'm very happy because of that, and I think it's very logical that the first visit is the visit to Brussels, to the headquarters of NATO, where we are the member of, as well as the visit to the European Union that we have negotiations with. You mentioned that it's been a year since Montenegro achieved its foreign policy priority to become a member to NATO. This is an opportunity, among other things, also to discuss together about how Montenegro used this first year of membership. We tried to use this first year of membership to recognize a realistic space or room that a new member has within the alliance. And we tried to join in our efforts and our capacities to the efforts to achieve the priorities and goals of NATO. I believe that we showed the expected responsibility and the capacities, capabilities, and I believe that the NATO alliance did not regret accepting us as members. We certainly have recognized many benefits already coming from our membership, and we have recognized certain benefits that are not related only to Montenegro, but they are related to the region, stability of the region and Euro-Atlantic perspective of the region. It is very important for me to say in the very beginning that Montenegro has confirmed its stable and decisive commitment towards the Euro-Atlantic and European development. And I think all the events in the last year and a half have confirmed that, and particularly the last results in the elections. We also have recognized benefits when it comes to the dynamics of our economic development and development of democracy and overall development of Montenegro. And I believe that in the near future, we will be able to achieve our second goal, and that is full-fledged membership in the European Union. We are very glad to see the attention that NATO is paying towards the region, and we are trying to be a good partner to NATO and the European Union in promoting the values of Europe and NATO. You mentioned several achievements that Montenegro has made in the implementation of the NATO politics. And I want to repeat that we will continue doing that in the future when it comes to the allocation of the part of our budget to defense and in terms of our contribution to the peacekeeping missions, and also when it comes to the contribution of our country to the funds for certain countries that are still faced with the crisis, and NATO is helping them to solve them. We want to express full solidarity to the goals that NATO promotes when it comes to Russia, double-track policy that you mentioned, but also the policies of NATO towards other countries, with particular focus on southern borders of NATO, because we are positioned in the Balkans and Mediterranean. I would also like to thank you for the willingness of two members of NATO, Greece and Italy, to take over the control of the airspace of Montenegro. This is a very concrete benefit that Montenegro, as a new member today, can feel. I believe that in our cooperation, we will ensure that the NATO airspace above Montenegro is reliable and secure. and that we will contribute in that way to better achieving of the security and defense interests and goals of NATO. And I believe that in that way we are actually just solidifying and reinforcing the prospects of our region to fully become member of NATO and EU. I look forward to the Brussels summit. I believe that the priorities are defined realistically and that they are achievable. We will try to contribute through our participation in the summit and to contribute to further affirmation of NATO policy.
To the lady over there from Montenegro TV. Yeah, thanks.
How Montenegro shown as or behave as a member state year after membership in NATO?
What we have seen is that during the year that Montenegro has been a member of NATO, Montenegro has proven that Montenegro is a net contributor of security to our transatlantic alliance. And Montenegro is contributing to our shared security in many different ways. Montenegro contributes to stability in the Western Balkans. The accession of Montenegro into NATO promotes stability in the Western Balkans because security promotes prosperity, and this has contributed to the security of the whole Euro-Atlantic region. Then we have also the very concrete contributions Montenegro is making, both to our mission in Kosovo, KFOR, but also the fact that Montenegro is now stepping up the contributions to our mission in Afghanistan, which is about fighting terrorism, preventing Afghanistan from once again becoming a safe haven for international terrorism. Then Montenegro has participated in different NATO exercises, showing that the forces of Montenegro can work together with the forces of other NATO allies, contributing to our collective defense. And then I will also highlight the fact that Montenegro has started to invest more in defense, in modern capabilities, in strengthening the armed forces of Montenegro, and has a clear plan for how to reach the goal of spending 2% of GDP on defense by 2024. So Montenegro contributes in many different ways, and Montenegro is a highly valued ally, and also welcome the strong commitment of President Đukanović to NATO and the leadership he is showing in leading Montenegro as a member of the alliance.
Lady over there from Pop TV. Yeah.
Daily newspaper Pobjeda. I have questions for Mr. Stoltenberg and Montenegrin president. Do you think year after Montenegro entered NATO that we in South and Eastern Europe live in a safer region? Do you think that we are safer?
I think that the fact that Montenegro has become a member has made Montenegro safer in a more demanding security environment. The reality is that we see around Europe more challenges, more unpredictability. We see all the turmoil and the violence to the south in North Africa, Middle East, but not least in Iraq and Syria. But we also see a more assertive Russia being willing to use military force against the neighbor, as we have seen in Ukraine. But in this more demanding security environment, NATO has become stronger. NATO has responded to the unpredictability and to the uncertainty we see surrounding us. And NATO has become bigger with a new member, Montenegro. And all of that has helped to strengthen NATO, helped to strengthen Montenegro, because we are stronger together than alone, based on the idea that the core idea of NATO is that if one ally is attacked, it's regarded as an attack against all of us. So the accession of Montenegro to NATO has made Montenegro safer and also NATO stronger.
Well, my response, my answer would be similar to what Mr. Stoltenberg said. So there is no doubt that the membership of Montenegro in NATO and the progress of every Western Balkans country towards the membership in NATO is a contribution to stability and better prospects of the region. I believe that the price that we are paying today in the Western Balkans, and that is related to the insufficiently high quality of life, this is the price that we are paying for the roots and causes that we have been aware of for a long time. And that is the wish to live according to the rules that are not European rules. What we are doing now in the Balkans, I see as an attempt to take the Balkans back to its natural Euro-Atlantic haven. We do recognize the resistance, of course, but I would say that they are generated from two reasons. First is the fact that there is still strong resistance towards this U-turn of the Balkans towards the Western Europe. The forces that actually advocate the traditional way of thinking, that would like to keep the situation of chaos and lack of perspective, they show resistance that are getting stronger the closer we are to our goals. Those are the last signs of resistance. They find it difficult to accept that we will in the future live according to the European standards. I'm not talking about the membership in NATO or European Union here, but about the Europeization. And the other problem is what is happening in the European and the global scene. Today, we can see that Europe has more problems than it had 10 years ago, and that the relations in the global scenes are more tensed than we who live today could remember. I mean, we can't remember that they were more tense any time in the past. So the fact is that we have problems, but they can't drive us away from our main path, and that is that the Balkans should go along the path of Euro and Euro-Atlantic integration, because when it comes to our region, it is the condition of our stability and democratic development.
To Mr. Stoltenberg, did you talk about state of democracy in Montenegro, especially freedom of the media? Do you think that calling leading media in Montenegro fascist and equalizing them with mafia gangs helps creating safe or hostile environment for media freedom? Another question, you mentioned Russia. Mr. Đukanović and Mr. Putin expressed publicly that they want to improve relations. You also mentioned dual-track approach. Does that go together with that dual-track approach? Do you think it's good or bad for NATO that Montenegro has better relations with NATO, with Russia, sorry? To Mr. Đukanović, do you think that easing sanctions or abolishing sanctions at all against Russia is the way to go to improve the relations with Russia? Thank you.
First, on the relations with Russia, both President Đukanović and I highlighted the importance of what we call the dual-track approach to Russia, which is about that we have to be strong, we have to be united, we have to be firm, and we have to react when Russia is violating international rules, for instance, violating the sovereignty, the territorial integrity of a neighbor like Ukraine, or when Russia is responsible for cyber attacks or attempts to meddle in our domestic democratic processes, as we have seen in several NATO-allied countries. Then we have to be strong, we have to be clear, and we have to be united in our response. And that's also the reason why all NATO allies have supported the economic sanctions. Having said that, Russia is our neighbor. Russia is there to stay, and we are not aiming at isolating Russia. We will continue to strive for a better relationship with Russia, and especially when the tensions are high, as they are now, it is important to have a dialogue with Russia to at least avoid miscalculations, incidents and accidents, and if they happen, make sure that they don't spiral out of control. So even if we don't, or also when the relations are difficult, it is of particular importance to have a dialogue with Russia. And that's exactly the same message as I've heard from Montenegro, that they are striving for a better relationship with Russia. They are not aiming at isolating Russia, and that's also the same message as NATO as an alliance is sending out. Dialogue, striving for a better relationship, but at the same time being clear that we protect each other and that we don't accept the behavior of Russia when they violate international rules or use military force against neighbors. When it comes to the freedom of press, first of all, the freedom of the media is an important part of any democracy. And rule of law, democracy and individual liberty are core values for NATO. And one of the issues we focused very much on during the accession period was, of course, the importance of these values also for Montenegro. And I think that for all NATO allies, these are extremely important. But at the same time, I think we have to accept that as part of an open and vibrant democracy, there are different views and sometimes also strong opinions which we can disagree with, but that's part of a democratic debate to also have disagreements and different views.
I saw that part of the people who have different political opinions and some of the analysts, commentators and independent and professional media tried to interpret my assessment as turning of Montenegro away from NATO and turning towards Russia. There's nothing of that in my statement. It is a kind of speculation about the politics of my country and my own. So our position towards Russia is absolutely clear, and Mr. Stoltenberg helped me to clarify this and to understand very precisely by everyone, to be understood by everyone very precisely. Support to NATO is not expressed only by words, but supporting all the time the values of the system that we are a part of. So there is no dilemma in our country whether we should comply with the foreign and security policy. I mean, if we have come so far in our process of negotiation with the European Union, it goes without saying that we will share the foreign and security policy of European Union. And if we are member to NATO, we of course share our political opinions with NATO. And actions in the territory of Ukraine or some other activities of Russia that we saw, for example, in Montenegro in 2016 during our elections, we will condemn those things. That's why we had to, unfortunately, accept the sanctions towards Russia because we want to divert them from the activities that they do and lead Russia back to the zone where we will be able to cooperate as we did earlier. We think that it is the question of determination and persistence to keep and preserve the system that you belong to. We belong to the European system of values, and we think that such activities as Russia's activities that I described are attempts to destroy the system of values, and there is no doubt that we will defend the system of values that we belong to. And my invitation is aimed at leaving the area where we are punishing each other. It is just a voice of responsibility to accept the reality. Russia is our neighbor. We are not identical. We are different. There are no two countries in the world that are identical. There are no two neighbors that are identical. We have to learn to live with the differences that will not jeopardize us, but help us to cooperate and to harmonize as much as possible. And I believe in such a process. It is the evolution process. And that's why I said that it is not our decision to remain in the situation of constant punishing and sanctioning. No, our wish is to go back to the time from just a couple of years ago where we had very constructive cooperation within the NATO-Russia Council. We believe in such an approach. And that is why there is no hidden meaning or intention in my statement related to our relations with Russia. Montenegro is firmly and decisively committed to work on the further affirmation of the system of values of NATO and to confirm those values in the region that we live in. But with the responsibility of a NATO member, we have to think about the global issues, and we have to propose certain initiatives and the solutions that may lead to sorting out the situation outside of our region as well, on the global scene as well. Because, you know, I just recently mentioned how dangerous the reflections of the bad situation and instability from our region can be.